Good morning, dear students. Welcome to another session of generic digital switching system model. So in previous sessions we went through the introductory part, then we discussed about the hardware architecture, then software architecture, different recovery strategies, and then we went through a simple call through a digital switching system. In continuation of this, let us move further as to what happens when these two customers are on same interface controllers, when they are on different interface controllers, and one customer is on line and the other is on a trunk, and how the calls get established. If customer A is on line and customer B is on a line module, then how the calls go through. If customer A is on a line and customer B is on a trunk, then how the calls go through. If customer B is on a trunk and customer B is on a line, then what all steps are involved. So that is what we have to check out. So the first one which comes is Intra IC calls, that is intra interface controller calls. Now here, so as discussed in the previous condition, customer A wants to call customer B, and here if both the customers are on the same interface, then we term it as Intra IC calls, interface controller calls. And in this case, what is happening is customer A is connected to a line module and customer B is connected to its own line module. So in this case, what are the steps which are involved when a customer A dials the number of customer B? Now in all the condition, almost the steps remain same except for some few steps which get involved. So I'll not be discussing those things again and again, just a specification will be given. So here let us assume that everything is fine, customer A and customer B, everything is fine, they are provided with the required facilities or features. Now customer A, who is on line module, lifts his phone and dials a number of customer B. Now what happens is this information is given to interface controller through the line module which is present on customer A. Now this is basically called the leg, which is the involvement of customer A to, that is interaction of customer A to the interface controller via the line module. We specify it as a leg. Even we specify the same thing even for here, that is from interface controller to the customer B via the line module. So even that is also specified as leg. And when we come to here at this part, whether it is from the trunk to the interface controller or from the interface controller to the trunk, even for that also we sometimes refer the term as legs. Okay, so here customer A dials the line, that information is received by the line module, then line module gives an indication to the interface controller. Now interface controller directly doesn't assign the link between A and B. What interface controller does is interface controller gives this information to NCP. It tells that customer A has gone off hook. So what NCP does in that condition is, since it is having its own database, so that is what we had seen, that interface controllers do not have database, so they don't maintain any details of the customers. It is just the interfaces what they are looking after, but NCP and CPs have the database. That is what we had seen in the previous module related to the maintenance. Now in this case, what happens is interface controller gives an indication to NCP telling that okay, customer A has gone off hook. So what NCP does is NCP tries to see what are the features which are enabled, what are the features which are provided to customer A. Now if he is permitted to have, so he checks for those things, and since customer A is having a outgoing call, so it has to check whether outgoing facility is provided to A or not. So NCP does that, and it tells that okay, it is permitted. So what it does is it takes those digit line modules, accept the digits, and it gives those digits to interface controller. So interface controller gives the information to the NCP that these are the digits which are being dialed. Now again, the NCP has to cross verify that if some numbers are being dialed, it is belonging to whom. So in this case, it should be belonging to B. Now again, NCP, if B is connected on the same interface controller which is connected to NCP, then NCP can check. So let us assume a simple thing that B is present under the same NCP. So in this case, what happens is B is the person whom A wants to contact. Now NCP also checks whether B is having incoming call facility or not. So that is, he basically checks, the NCP basically checks the features which are enabled to customer B. So now if the features are enabled to customer B, what happens is it allocates a time slot. It allocates a time slot in the switching fabric for customer A to get connected, and that is done via the interface controller. So now a time slot has been allotted to customer A. Now after getting an indication of a time slot, the interface controller makes use of this switching fabric and tries to establish a connection to customer B. In order to do that, it has to connect to the line module of customer B, and this line module will help to test the line and try to see what all things are present and whether customer B is available or not. So these all things are checked via the line module by the interface controller. Now what this does is, as we had discussed, that dial tone has to be provided, those all stuffs, these all things will be looked after these line modules. Now line module gives an indication that customer B is having a call, and what customer B has to do is he has to lift the call. Now in this process, what happens is another time slot is allocated for B. This is time slot for A. So basically, in order to allocate the time slot, we make use of something called as time switch. We make use of what is termed as time switch. So once the call has been established, that is A has called through line this thing, it goes to NCP. Now NCP has given a time slot. Now in the meantime, a time slot is also allocated to B, and customer B gets an indication. Now when customer B lifts the phone, that is he goes off hook on receiving a call, now they make use of something called as space switch to establish the connection, that is in short yes. So therefore this switching fabric follows what is termed as TST switching method, that is first the time slot, next it has the space switch, and another one the time slot which is relevant to customer B. So this is what is happening. So this is intra IC calls when we have line module to line module, that is line to line intra IC call. Now almost the same things happen in the next figure what we have shown, that is line to trunk intra IC outgoing call, that is OGT is outgoing trunk which is referred to the call. Now in this case again the same thing, A lifts the phone and dials the number, so that is given to line module, interface controller, and line module gives that information to interface controller. This goes to again NCP. NCP checks whether customer A is having all the features. If yes, it receives that number and sees to whom it has to go. So now it gets to know that customer B is not present on a line module which is connected to interface controller, but it is present on a trunk module which is connected to the same interface controller. So in this case what happens is since it is connected to a trunk module, it is an indication that it is in different central office. So this is in another central office and this is in another central office. Previously, what did this overall thing indicate is that all these things are present on the same central office, but now this is different and this is different. So that is what is specified. So now instead of directly going through line module, now I have to go through a trunk module, since I have to get established with the central office to whom customer B is connected. So after this, customer B gets the dial tone, and once he receives, this part is cut off. Same thing is happening here. So once customer B receives the phone, then this path gets established and this path is cut through. So therefore we specify that we provide a cut through path. So this is helping in establishing the overall path, but once the call gets established, that is B receives the phone, we cut through this path. This is not necessary. So through the switching fabric we get the communication, but NCP is still activated because it has to get the information regarding as to how long the conversation is going on, how long the utilization is being done. It may be required for servicing purpose or billing purpose and other stuffs. So that is what is happening. So again here a time slot will be allotted to A, then after that a space switch will be utilized through the switching fabric, and then a time slot will be allotted which will be getting connected to central office and then to the customer B via the trunk module. So this is what will be happening. So once customer B lifts the phone, this path will be disconnected, so you will be having a cut through path between A and B. So that is how Intra IC calls propagate in a digital switching system. Let us move further. Now what is meant by Inter IC calls? So Intra specifies that customer A and B are allocated to the same interface controllers. Now it is Intra, it implies that customer A is on a different IC and customer B is on a different IC, that is interface controllers. So again, as we discussed previously, the same thing happens here, but what is the indication that A is connected to customer A is connected to interface controller X and B is connected to interface controller Y. Rest all things again happen in the same way. Customer A lifts the phone and dials the number. Line module accepts that information and gives that information to interface controller. Interface controller in turn gives that information to NCP. Now NCP again checks the features of A which are provided to features which are enabled for customer A. So once it checks that, it if everything is fine, it allots a time switch a time slot to customer A. Then a space switch is utilized, or a space switch is allocated in the switching fabric via the interface controllers. After that the call goes through the interface controller ICY, and then it goes to the line module and then to the customer A. Again in this process NCP keeps a track whether that feature is enabled or provided for customer B or not. So now in this case again a time slot is allocated. Now once again customer B lifts the phone, this path is cut through, and this cut through path is enabled between A and B. So now A and B can have the conversation. Now since ICX and ICY is present, now here we can see that it is not implied that here only one NCP will be present. So in this case what might happen is here I might be having a NCPX which is relevant to ICX, and there might be another NCP which might be relevant to ICY. So in this case what happens is these two NCPs have to communicate in order to have a successful communication between A and B via the switching fabric what is being utilized. So these two have to communicate. So in this case that is what will be happening. This is the extra thing. This will be the additional parameter what will be involved. So, and here ICX will be controlled by NCPX and ICY will be controlled by NCPY. Now again the same thing happens here. So only a change is this is on different central office, this is on different central office, whereas in previous conditions both are on same central office. That is what is happening. So again in let us just have a brief look at this. Customer A lifts the phone, dials the number, and that has been identified by line module. That information is given to interface controller ICX, which is relevant to customer A, and then that goes to NCP. Let me specify it as X. So this information goes to NCP X. Now it gets to know that okay, this is enabled feature, and it gets to know that it is to customer B. Say it checks its routing information as to where that NCP where that customer is present. It gets to know that okay, it is present on different interface, and I have to contact NCP Y. So that is the information which will be utilized between these two. So once that information is utilized, then what is done is a time slot will be allotted for A. Then using the space switch, it tries to get established connection between the customer A and ICX and ICY, and then another time slot will be allocated for getting connected to the customer B, who is on a different outgoing trunk. And in this case a trunk module comes into play. Now again ICX will be controlled by NCPX and ICY will be controlled by NCPY. So that is what is happening here. So when customer B lifts the phone, what happens is a cut through path is made available between A and B is established, and the conversation can go further. So this is what happens in Inter IC calls. So now let us look at slightly a different approach. Now previously what we discussed was customer A is calling customer B. Now let us reverse the condition and see what happens in this case. So one additional thing what we have to look out is now in all the cases up to this point, you can see that call was coming through the line module. So here also it was referred to the line module. So here also line module. Now what happens if customer B makes the call and say trunk module is involved? This is just for simplicity. That is, even I can have the same condition specified as using customer A also. So let us not complicate the things. Now previously the same line was acting as an incoming line. Now what it has to do is it has to act as an outgoing line. So that is what is specified. IGT refers to incoming trunk. So why incoming trunk? Previously we saw that it was acting as an incoming trunk to customer B. So what if I use the same trunk to make a call to the other customer? So now in this case the same steps are again followed, no changes. Again I can have two parameters here when I make trunk to line. So I can have Intra IC and I can have Intra IC. So previously all were line to trunk InterIC, line to line InterIC, line to trunk InterIC, and line to line InterIC. Now I am reversing the condition, that is trunk to line with what happens when InterIC is there, and trunk to line what happens when InterIC is there. So using the same trunk, of the incoming trunk what was utilized by the customer B, I can utilize the same thing for outgoing calls from customer B. So customer B lifts the phone, trunk module identifies that, and that information is given to interface controller gives that information to NCP. So in this case NCP, say for example Y will be looking after in this case since it is on the same interface, only one NCP will be there for this interface controller. So NCP will be receiving the information on this. Now again what it does is it checks whether customer B is having the feature of having outgoing calls or not. If is permitted, then it moves further and allocates the time slot for B. So time slot will be allotted here then it checks that the information has to go to customer A, so that goes to interface controller and via the line, and that goes to line module, and then it is given and an indication to customer A is provided as to specifying that it is having a call. So in this time period again another time slot is allocated through the switching fabric. Now what is done is, once the customer lifts the phone, now using a switch path, a path will be established, that is a cut through path will be established. So I'll be having a path between these two, and during that process this NCP connection, the path between them might not be required. So here again we are making use of what the switching fabric makes use of TST, that is time, space and time switching facility. So that is what is happening here. So this is regarding trunk to the line module connection, trunk to line connection. Now again since this is a trunk, this is on separate, customer B is on separate central office and customer A is on separate central office. Similarly here this is on separate central office, this is on separate central office. So information has to go to the central office and via that the trunk module. So that is what is happening. So again what happens if I do the same thing, trunk to line with InterIC, that is I will be having two different ICs. A is connected on ICX and B is connected on ICY. So now customer B lifts the phone, so that information is given to trunk module. This information is again forwarded to ICY, and ICY further gives this information to NCP. Now since we are discussing about inter, so here I'll be having a separate NCP for ICY, that is NCPY will be taking care of ICY. Now it gets to know that it is not on the same interface, it is on interface, some other interface which is present in some other NCP. Say for example it is present on NCPY. So that information will be conveyed, and this NCP will communicate with ICX, and this in turn gives the information to line module, and then this information goes to the central office, and through there the customer A gets connected. Now again here a time slot will be allotted, and here another time slot, and in the switching fabric again in order to establish the final connection, once the customer A lifts the phone, a space switch is utilized to establish the connection. So once the customer A lifts, then the space switch is activated and a cut through path is provided between the two, that is B to A. That is what happens, and this path is cut through. So this is what is happening with relevance to the Inter IC incoming trunk call. That is the case. So let us wind up this session here itself. Let us meet in the next session for the last part of this module. Thank you.